I'm Brockman. I'm here to talk about solving unemployment, which is nearly impossible, but I decided to tackle it in under 5 minutes. No one seems to have a clear solution of how to deal with it, but I decided to take a historical look at it by looking at the Great Depression and its policies, and then comparing it to our own economic situation, as well as looking at alternatives. So now let's go to Great Depression. It began October 24th with Black Thursday, where the stock market began it's the most historic crash in U.S. history. About $30 billion in stocks just disappeared in a month, in the first month. And as it was crashing, the unemployment number was at 1.5 million, and then it doubled by the time the following March came by. And at the peak of the Great Depression, unemployment was about 30%. So some of the policies that the president incorporated were a few. These were like main job-based programs. The first one was the Tennessee Valley Authority, which focused on building dams, reforesting areas, as well as developing recreation lands. And it was kind of a social experiment to see if this sort of thing could work. And it led to bigger government programs, including the Civilian Conservation Corps, and at its peak it employed about 500,000 people to do work in national forests, parks, and federal lands. And then the programs kept getting bigger, and the Civil Works Administration was developed, and it was designed to employ about 4 million people to do infrastructure work. And then finally, the largest program was called the Works Projects Administration, which employed over time 8.5 million people, putting them to work on highways, roads, and infrastructure work once again. These programs did prove to be somewhat successful, but the unemployment rate never reached 0% until we entered World War II, which fully industrialized our nation and gave us all work to do. So now let's take a look at our own crisis. Some people are calling it the Great Recession. So far, right now, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, I believe, unemployment nationally sits at about 9.7%, but there's a lot of numbers out there, and right now they're estimating about 14 million people are out of work. The main policy that has been incorporated, we've all heard it being called the Stimulus Act. Its formal name is the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. It's a huge piece of legislation, and it's got lots of money going in different places. But some of the ones I pulled that specifically try to put people to work is the $80 billion for infrastructure work. And that's going to highways and bridges and everything, that sort of similar to what we did during the Great Depression. Also, there's $8 billion for intercity rail, as well as the high-speed rail system. This is what it's intended to look like in 2030 if it continues. Also, millions of dollars are also being spent on conservation projects in national parks. Some alternative solutions. There's so many ideas of how to fix unemployment, but I just pulled a few of these. The National Job Database is an idea pulled from Sweden. They have a system where all employers, all jobs and all employees are just put into a system, and it allows for faster finds of jobs and things like that. Green jobs is a big movement. As you can see, like solar panels, wind power, they're trying to put incentives towards that to create jobs. And then of course tax cuts to provide incentives to businesses to hire. Those are just a few of the vast number of ideas to solve this problem. So the economic situation is a complete mess, and it's very complex. There's so many different things involved, and I'm definitely not an economist or anything. I just thought that taking an historical example of crisis and recovery would be a good way of applying it to our own crisis and recovery. So that's why I took you from the Great Depression to our own time and some alternative solutions. Thanks. Those are my questions.